Hello fellow science lovers, join me as we take a short journey to a captivating place in our universe, and let's find out what's happening there. Why, you ask? Because who doesn't like science? Today's topic is the moon, and I've got good news, we're going back. Let me take you back to July 20th, 1969 at 10:56 p.m. I was 7 years old, and I was sitting on my dad's knee watching a small black and white TV. Astronaut Neil Armstrong was 240,000 miles from Earth as he spoke these words to more than 1 billion people who were watching.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I remember my emotion at that moment, sort of the way people remember when President Kennedy died or when the Trade Center buildings collapsed. But this sensation was more like feeling I was a member of this mission. It continues to be one of my earliest vivid memories. It increased my curiosity about the universe. I became more interested in astronomy and physics. It literally changed me in a positive way. NASA astronauts visited the moon's surface 5 more times between 1970 and 1972. And when we stopped, I asked my dad why. He said that the government thought it was just too expensive. Ironically, the cost of going to the moon was astronomical. The Apollo program's total cost was about $152 billion in today's dollars. After the Apollo program was canceled, NASA shifted their focus to putting people in orbit around Earth. I gotta say, I was sad. I felt like we should be going further out, not closer. You've heard the adage, if we can put a man on the moon, then why can't we cure cancer or create workable fusion reactors or insert your seemingly near impossible task? As a child, my follow-up always had been, if we can put a man on the moon, then why can't we put a person on Mars or one of the moons around Saturn or Jupiter or even an asteroid? What I didn't understand was that sending people further out is complicated. Space is big. The moon seemed pretty far away when we went there, and it's only 250,000 miles away. Mars is 140 million miles from Earth on average. Going is going to take about 8 months. Astronauts will need to carry a lot of fuel, oxygen, water, and food. Just consider this. The average person eats about 4 pounds of food a day. That equates to about 1,000 pounds of food per person just for the trip to Mars. Then there's the food needed on the surface and the return trip. In addition to working out problems of sustaining human life on such a long journey, we also have to consider the physical and psychological effects. For instance, we don't know the precise long-term health effects of solar radiation in deep space, or how isolation and confinement for a total of 2 to 3 year mission in a metal tube surrounded by a vacuum in space would have on the mind and body. The longest period a human has been in space is 1.2 years, a record held by Valery Polyakov. The good news is that he didn't suffer any significant physical or psychological effects. However, he was only in near-Earth orbit. He could see his home below him, and he had an escape capsule that would have him home in about 24 hours if anything went wrong. During a mission to Mars, we don't have a good understanding on how a crew would handle the psychological impact that if something catastrophic happened to the ship or a person on their team, their nearest rescue would be 8 months away. Skylab was NASA's first attempt at putting humans in space for periods longer than a couple of weeks, but not so far out into space that we were not protected from the more harmful radiation effects. In low Earth orbit, the lab was partially protected by the magnetic field of the Earth, the same field that protects us here on the surface of the planet. Skylab was launched in May 1973, and over a 6-month period, NASA sent a total of 3 crews to the station. The crews spent successively more time at the station, and the 3rd crew spent a total of 84 days in space. Skylab's orbit started to decay prematurely, so that was the last mission to the station. The lab crashed into the Indian Ocean in July 1979. With Skylab in the rearview mirror, NASA focused on the Space Shuttle program and the International Space Station. In April 1981, NASA launched the first Space Shuttle mission. A fleet of 6 spacecraft flew a total of 135 missions between 1981 and 2011. Each mission duration lasted approximately 2 weeks. These missions allowed NASA to fix damaged satellites, put new satellites into orbit, including the Hubble Space Telescope. The Shuttle program also contributed to the construction of the International Space Station, ISS. The station serves as a research laboratory where crew members conduct experiments in general biology, human biology, physics, astronomy, and meteorology. The first section of the ISS was launched in 1998, and astronauts arrived in 2000. The station has been occupied for 19 years, which is the longest continuous human presence in low Earth orbit. The station is expected to operate until at least 2030. The ISS has been visited by astronauts, cosmonauts, and space tourists from 19 different countries around the world. To date, a total of 239 people from 19 countries have visited the station, with more than half of them coming from the US. Which brings up one unfortunate reality about the end of the Space Shuttle program in 2011. After the last shuttle was retired, the US had to rely on Russian spacecraft to take US astronauts up to and down from the ISS. That is until last year when SpaceX launched the Crew Dragon capsule, which is capable of carrying up to 7 passengers and delivering 6 tons of cargo up to the ISS and 3 tons of cargo back down to Earth. Like Skylab, the space station is constantly losing orbital energy due to the very thin but ever-persistent drag in the very upper limits of the atmosphere. In order to compensate for this loss, the space station must be periodically reboosted to higher orbit. NASA and the Russian Space Agency burn up to 25,000 pounds of propellant each year just to keep the station at its designed orbit. So getting back to our original topic, the Moon. Are we going back? The answer is yes. NASA has a plan to get manned missions to the Moon in 2024, and the U.S. Office of Management and Budget requested the necessary funds in its 2020 budget. NASA plans to use a new heavy-lift rocket called the Space Launch System, or SLS, to carry a new Orion spacecraft into space. The missions have been named ARTEMIS. The first 3 ARTEMIS missions will focus on placing a space station in orbit around the Moon. The station will be called the Lunar Gateway and will serve as a communications hub, a laboratory, a short-term habitation module, and a holding area for rovers and other robots. The station will literally be a gateway through which they will send missions to the Moon. Here's the concept. The SLS carries the Orion into orbit. The Orion detaches and rockets to the Moon. Orion docks with the Lunar Gateway. Astronauts transfer over to the Lunar Gateway. They travel to the lunar surface via a lunar lander. They explore the Moon. They return to the Lunar Gateway, and Orion returns to Earth. While the Artemis project is led by NASA, the Gateway is meant to be developed, serviced, and utilized in collaboration with commercial and international partners. Not only will the Lunar Gateway serve as the staging point for exploration of the lunar surface, it's also the proposed staging point for NASA's deep space transport to Mars. And as we operate on and around the Moon, NASA will continue to study the hazards of space, with hopes to close the gap in our current understanding of the effects of deep space on the body and the mind. Ultimately, these studies could enable NASA to develop and test technologies and countermeasures to protect the health and safety of crewmen. That's right, I'm excited that we're going back to the Moon, but I'm doubly excited that we're also focusing what we learned from Artemis to continue our goal to put people on Mars. When the day comes for humans to launch a journey to Mars, humanity will take another giant leap. And for those of you who were not around the moment Neil Armstrong first stepped onto the Moon, you may just have another chance to feel that thrill when we go there again. Thank you for watching this episode. If you want to see more episodes like this, the way you can let me know is by liking this video and subscribing to this channel. And if there are areas of the universe you would like me to explore, let me know by leaving a comment.